The wisdom of ripening. Thank you for joining us again today. Subscribing and leaving a like are the kindest support you can give.
What if the door opens and the past walks in wearing the scent you never forgot? What if one cup of coffee wakes the body you promised to keep quiet? I told myself to breathe, but the air between us was already evening warm. Hello, my name is Grace Hahn. I am a 58-year-old woman living near Galveston, Texas. I run a small coffee truck that serves the coastal job sites. My husband passed 7 years ago, and I've learned to carry both rent and silence with the same hands. The foreman called for 2 coffees to the site office. I nudged the trailer door with my hip, tray steady, smile rehearsed. The man who looked up was sun-browned. Salt and pepper hair cropped neat, sleeves pushed to his forearms. I knew him before my mind admitted it. David Cole, my late husband's college friend, the man who laughed like he was careful with joy. We should have said each other's names. We didn't. His gaze found the tremor in my fingers and pretended not to. The foreman, Mr. Ruiz, played generous and let his hand rest too low at my waist. "Be nice to our guest," he joked, and the joke scraped. The cups clinked, my pulse did the same. When Ruiz finally stepped out, the door clicked and the room exhaled. David's voice was lower than memory. "Are you okay here?" I set the tray down and arranged the lids like they mattered. "I'm working," I said. "Working keeps the lights on." He nodded as if he knew the wattage of my life. He did. The lines around his mouth were made by weather and patience. We stood close enough to share breath but not the same story. I told him the short version: morning shifts at the grocery store. Wrists that gave out, finding the city's appetite from behind a counter on wheels. He offered his traveling electrician, months on the road. A quiet divorce and motel ceilings. 2 people with serviceable backs and tired hearts. "Dinner?" he asked, gentle as a hand under a fragile plate. "Friday, if you want." The word Friday sat warm in my palm. I let it stay there. "All right," I said. "But no names." "Not yet." He smiled. It reached his eyes like sun finding a window. Outside, the Gulf breeze moved through my hair as if it had been waiting. Back at the truck, steam rose from the sink, and my reflection blurred in the chrome. I adjusted my scarf, touched my collarbone, felt a pulse that hadn't spoken in years. When the text came 8 p.m., La Paloma? I typed and erased and typed again. Yes. And a second line: I didn't know I needed "Let the wind be kind tonight." I rolled the metal down, locked the latch, and stood for a moment in the hush. The sky was the color of a secret. On the ride home, I rehearsed what not to say and what to allow. At the mirror, I fastened one button slower than usual, dabbed a trace of perfume on my wrist, and watched the drop turn warm. I said out loud, softly, the promise I could keep. Not fast, not loud, alive. Friday came dressed in soft light. I arrived early and waited inside the booth of a small Tex-Mex place where the waiters remembered to speak gently. When David walked in, work clothes traded for a clean shirt. The room shifted like someone turned the dimmer just right. We chose the corner seat. The salsa steamed a little, the ice in our water clicked like tiny metronomes. He asked how the 7 years had really been. I told him about the funeral smell that stayed too long. The debts that didn't, the way I learned to load cases of milk without
I
thinking
think this is
about
a crucial
weight.
point we need to
I
address.
didn't mention the nights.
Absolutely. Let me
I
just note
kept
that
the
down.
television on to keep the dark from speaking first. He talked about the highway ribbon, the job sites. The way loneliness teaches a man to fold his t-shirts exactly the same. When we lifted our glasses, I felt the small heat where his thumb had been. It was a careful heat, the kind that asks permission to stay. We let the first drink slow us. He asked about the truck, I asked about the places he keeps leaving. Between bites we traded small, sturdy hopes, new tires before winter. A job that lasts past spring. Do you have a ride home? He asked later. I do, I said. But I don't want to be alone. The truth left my mouth like a bird that had waited too long. Outside, a raffish wind lifted my hair. He slid his jacket around my shoulders, the lining cool, the rest warm. We walked without talking much. Our shadows braided and unbraided like they had their own plans. At my place I set a glass of water in his hand and took one for myself. I didn't offer explanations, only the lamp turned low. The hush that lets a heart hear itself. We closed the distance in inches, not leaps, wrist to palm, shoulder to breath. His patience met my caution and made a soft border. I felt the long-stored ache in my chest loosen like a knot that finally learned the trick of itself. We didn't race the clock. We let it walk. The room smelled of citrus from the soap and something new I refused to name. When it grew quiet enough, I heard the tide in my own body change. He rested his forehead to mine and said nothing. It was the right language. Later, we cleaned the table we hadn't used, smiling at our own ceremony. He asked if he could call me. I told him we should not run no names in public, no claims we can't carry. We choose a speed we can keep, I said. He agreed, relieved like a man who finally found the right pair of boots. He left with the jacket over his arm and a small promise in his pocket. At the door he looked back. Are you all right? His eyes asked. I am, mine answered. The hall was cool when I closed it. But my wrists were warm where my pulse had remembered. In the quiet after, I wrote 2 words on a sticky note for the morning. Go gently. Then I fixed the note to the fridge. And let the night end without hurrying it away. The highway opened south and the Gulf kept us company. Rockport was small, bright with bait shops and pelicans. I watched the water keep its balance, crest and hush, like steady lungs. In my lap I folded a thin anxiety into a square and told it to wait. We found a month-to-month place, 2 doors on the same breezeway. The manager slid 2 keys across a counter that smelled of lemon. The keys kissed my palm with a cold ring. His room, mine. Space between us, a polite breath. At the cheap table we wrote our rules on a diner napkin. Keep our own schedules. In public we are neighbors. We do not use names where they can stick. Ask for help before the last minute. Do not sleep angry. I added one more line in tidy print. Do not rush. He smiled the way a man does when a shoe finally fits without rubbing the heel. We unpacked with quiet care. I folded 2 mugs and a skillet into the cabinet. Slid tea next to instant coffee. He set his tools just so, coils and tape stacked like small moons. Between us moved an unspoken courtesy, a slow choreography. That night I heard his footsteps through the floorboards. An even rhythm that matched my breath without trying. We walked the pier after dark. Nets hung like quiet handwriting. A boy showed his grandfather a phone light. We kept our shoulders from touching, not because we didn't want to, but because we had promised not to spill. He asked if I was afraid. I told him yes, and that fear can be a rail to hold when the bridge is narrow. Back at the apartments, we drifted to our doors. Under my mat I left 2 clementines. In the morning, his chuckle at the thin citrus perfume reached me through the wall. And I smiled into coffee. Already the day had a shared hinge. Work settled into its rhythm. I picked up a few shifts at a family grocery on Market Street. He crossed the bridge each dawn to wire a marina remodel. Evenings clicked soup, laundry, half a TV show. We spoke cleanly and trusted the unsaid. One night I boiled noodles and he showed up with a loaf of bread in a paper bag. He sliced it with care, thumb braced, blade slow, as if trimming life into pieces. After dishes he stood for a second at my door. The hall light cut his shoulders into a calm outline. He did not knock. I did not open. Sometimes keeping a promise is touch. On Tuesday he said Ruiz had asked too many questions. And pretended not to be asking. I poured him tea and slid a plate of sliced apples between us. We ate slowly. The pier lights kept their beat. I thought, let the world be noisy if it must. Let our speed stay chosen. Before sleep I held the napkin rules to the lamp. The ink made a little shadow against the shade, like lines on a palm. If you read it right, it tells a future. Not glamorous, steady. My pulse answered, an old engine idling. As if happy to have found the right gear. News travels faster than feet in a small coastal town. The cashier at the grocery started asking how my neighbor liked his bread. And the word neighbor knocked softly inside me. I smiled and bagged oranges. The paper sounded loud. That evening I told David. We stood by the window with the blinds tilted half closed. The harbor was dusk-colored boats clicked on their ropes. We recited the rules like vows. Not fast. Not public. Not careless. He touched the sill, not my hand. Sometimes the right distance is the only way to be close. A week later Mr. Ruiz came through my line with eggs and a searching look. He asked about the coffee truck, about new tires, about whether I liked Rockport better than Galveston. I answered like a person with weather on the brain, safe and polite. His receipt printed too slowly, and the paper slowly left my hand. When he left, a cool space remained in front of me like an outline cut from air. Rain came heavy Saturday. We tucked under the same awning outside the hardware store. His jacket was freckled with water, my hair clung like seagrass. He took a cloth from his pocket and dried the back of my fingers, not the palm. A measured kindness. I let him. We did not meet each other's eyes, and that felt more intimate than a gaze. That night a drunk guest hammered the wrong door. And shouted a woman's name that was not mine. I froze with one hand on the knob, listening through the wood. David's voice came from the hall, low as the edge of a storm. Wrong room, friend. The man wandered off, the hall swallowed the noise, and quiet returned. David did not knock. Instead he tapped the wall once, a steady heartbeat. I tapped back. The corridor carried the signal. People looked longer at me the next week. Maybe it was my towel, my purpose. Maybe nothing. I ironed my blouse and wore cherry lipstick. If they were going to watch, I could at least decide the lighting. We ate by the window that night, bowls of stew cooling as we talked. He mentioned permits, a shipment of wire, the way salt eats metal. I told him the cash drawer sticks on warm days, a thumb finesses it. When he reached for the pepper, I saw a nick on his knuckle. I wanted to kiss it better and did not. The wanting was a chord. I held the note and let it fade. Late, the harbor fog moved in. We both closed our blinds. On my table the napkin rules had softened at the creases. I added a new line in smaller print. If someone is hurt, we use names. It felt like saving a shelf for something you pray not to need. I slept lightly. Near dawn, gulls tore the night and stitched it back. I woke with a strange peace. Balance is not a still thing, I wrote on a sticky note. It is a held sway. I stuck it to the mirror and met my own eyes. As if greeting a steady stranger I was beginning to trust. Winter changed the sound of the water. The bay stopped gossiping and hummed. We learned heater smell, stiff mornings, soup at night. We didn't talk as much, but the quiet felt earned, not empty. One evening he asked a question that could have stayed unasked. Can we keep this shape and still be all right? I lifted my mug and gave him what I believed. Yes. Today's speed writes tomorrow's answer. If the answer changes, we will change gently. He nodded, and a hidden smile warmed the room. A cold snap dropped through town and the windows filmed with breath. We opened our doors together, towels in hand. Our heads tilted in the same angle. And we laughed before either of us said a word. Some days love is the same small chore for the same small reason. Mr. Ruiz still orbited, but gravity thinned. We made small adjustments and moved like dancers who know how to exit before the music invites a bow. Separate mornings, different aisles. On stairs, one step between us, in elevators, different buttons. On New Year's Eve we stood at the breezeway, railing with paper cups of cocoa and watched far-off bursts smudge the sky. Tomorrow, he said, we keep our speed. Say love, he added, but do not forget the rent. I let the word rest like a warm coin behind my teeth. A soft spring forecast came in January, and we drove to a quiet pier. We ate hot fish tacos from a truck and shared a soda like teenagers. I straightened his scarf, he set my cap more square. We took no pictures, the memory did not need proof. Back home I wrote a note and slid it under his door. I will keep your pace today. Please keep mine. No trophies, just practice. That evening my doormat held 2 clementines and a tiny paper crane folded from a receipt. I peeled one and the room filled with obedient sun. Storms returned in March. One night the wind banged something metal out on the street, and I startled upright. When I opened my door, his was already open. We stood across the breezeway like actors who knew their marks and tapped the handrail once in unison. The sound was small, exact, enough. Now I know what a secret is for. It is not to hide, it is to hold what is fragile so it can grow. Each morning I set a bowl and choose a spoon. Each evening I check locks and lamp. Love is not center stage anymore. It is the hand backstage keeping lights from going dark. We are all right, I tell myself over the last cup. We will likely be all right tomorrow, too. I promise no more than that. I will keep our speed, use names only when it matters. Call love by its name and still count the rent. I will keep the light steady. Thank you for listening. If a line here found you, leave a few words and help someone else find them. Share this with a friend who needs a gentler pace. Subscribe, like, and set the bell so more stories can arrive. See you next time. May your evening be gracious, and your pace be kind.